welcome to Don't Need These, another guide on the Bearfoot Miniatures channel. I'm joined today by no one, it's just myself, and we're going to be going over something that I've been looking at more recently, and that's the vampire counts. And so I started looking at vampire counts, I played them through Sixth, played them a couple of times in the old, or a number of times in the old world, and basically this was going to be my original Bretonian project, was Morsel on vampire counts. So it's a list that I've looked over a good number of times, and I think I can do it on my own. But let me know in the comments with anything that I miss. These guides are meant to be more like talking points and information that's both enjoyable and information for people to just get stuck in with vampire counts. So if I do miss anything, help out and let me know below. Basically, vampire counts, in my opinion, are an army of lots of chaff and then some heavy hitters. And they do have a few drawbacks that we'll go over. The main special rule to start with is the necromantic undead rule, and everything in the army, unless there's a massive curveball in there, comes with necromantic undead. Like, I've not noticed anything that doesn't have it yet. So basically you cause fear, so that's going to cause you to want to take bigger units of things, and that's mainly going to come in with your skeletons, larger units of black knights, definitely zombies because they're only chaff. I mean, skeletons only chaff as well, right? Graveguard in bigger units, and that's so you can trigger fear kicking in more and more. And it also ties in with the unstable rule that you'll have, because as you lose combats, instead of taking tests, you'll with unbreakable in this list give ground instead of ever taking a test. So you will stick around a lot. Now, unstable is the drawback to that, and that will mean you lose extra wounds based on the combat res difference that you lost by. If you win, happy days, you don't lose anything. But it's not a massive worry so long as you're prepared if you start losing combats, because your line won't fall back, and you can, with these chaff units, these large chaff units, absorb a lot of casualties. It ties into your fear, and it means that you've got a really solid base with which to start, and it's reliable. It's something that has always, in my opinion, been very good about vampire counts and Tomb Kings, but that your army is just going to dependably do what you want it to. And then the rest of your job is to come up to make up for the downsides that you're going to get with this. You're immune to psychology, it just ties in with the unbreakable. Basically, you're just passing all sorts of tests. The big drawback, because I know unstable is a drawback, but in the face of unbreakable, I'd say it's a give and a take there. The big drawback of necromantic undead is that unless you've got the fly special rule, you're not going to be able to march unless you have another special rule. Layers and layers of special rules here. You're not going to be able to march. Now, that's something that you can start mitigating with other things in the list, which allow you to reserve moves. So instead of marching, you'll move in the movement, move in the shooting, in this sort of double stage move. And what that will allow you to do is use drilled on multiple occasions, because it's just before a move. And I mean, hopefully an FAQ comes out and clears up how drilled is going to use. So if that's not how you think drilled is used, we can only interpret, right, based until an FAQ comes out and clears it up. That is going to have big impacts on your army, the lack of ability to march. But one thing that offsets it is the vitality that your vampires will have, as well as some monstrous constructs and creatures. And that allows you to always march. Finally, you've got Indomitable. This is a rule that your X value of Indomitable reduces your unstable rule by X amount. So say a Vampire Lord, I believe it's Indomitable 2 off the top of my head, reduces the amount of wounds you suffer due to unstable by 2. So you want to have this rule, multiple things that might stack with this all together, and it will start making your units stick around for a lot longer. And Cleaving Blow, and that's in a multiple lists. and we'll get onto with the unit that actually comes into exact usefulness with. So we'll get on to, lest I forget, the death of a general, because I was just flicking to the vampire count, is basically you've got to have a wizard in your army. It's essentially like 1+ of wizards. You nominate a single wizard that must be a general, so will likely be your toughest character. And should that general be slain, the magic disappears and everyone starts becoming unbound. All units with the Necromantic Undead lose regeneration, which is a big one. But mainly, at the point that your general's removed, or the end of the phase, you start taking leadership tests in that phase, and then the start of every single one of your turns. And you lose wounds in the unit based on how many you failed that test by. So it's like unstable at your base leadership. The example's given Skeleton Warriors Leadership 5. If at the start of my turn I roll a test, on an 8 I lose 3 wounds. So your army slowly unbinds itself. So going into vampire counts now, and that will hopefully set us up for the magic items to give a bit more context to what we're talking about in the magic items list. So going into vampires, this is where you're going to want to most likely place your general. They don't start out as wizards, but have the ability to be upgraded to be wizards. So it does allow you to take it for the death of a general special rule. Now, they've got a good stat line. They've got movement 6 base, which is the same as an ogre. It's higher than any other infantry in the game, off the top of my head. You've got weapon skill 7, so you're the same as a Chaos Lord, which is usually my point of comparison for these things, because like a Chaos Lord's in the contention for the best lords, and weapon skill of the vampire count as good as that. BS 5, not going to come into it much. Strength toughness 5 is very good. It's up there, it's the same as a Chaos Lord, but then you've got 3 wounds, which is on the lesser side. I actually would have maybe expected to see counts a bit higher, but there are some items to mitigate that. You've got initiative 6, which is sort of on the higher side, but not quite elf. 4 attacks, and leadership 8, which might appear low, but I mean, if this guy's your general, you're unbreakable until like your general dies, so it doesn't matter. Along with the rest of your army, so you never need that leadership bubble. And at 160 points, the vampire count isn't actually too expensive, which will allow you to start taking vampiric bloodline powers. And at up to 100 points, this is where we sort of get the flavour of the Larmian, Necrarch, and Blood Dragon vampires. And Strigoi have their own separate entry. So how would I be taking my vampire count? There's 2 ways to really do vampire counts, and that's Blender Lord or Challenge Lord. Now, that will inform your choice of what you're going to end up doing with them. Blender Lord, on the mundane weapons, additional hand weapon, but the vampires are one of the races that, even though you don't need it because you've got strength 5, you can really do with some magical weapons just to take you over the edge, because you are, if you die, going to lose your entire army and likely the game. Great weapon, a bit chancy now, because the ability to kill your opponent before they start damaging you is a bit more of a question. Normally, I'm like, great weapons are great, always go for them. Here, I'm a bit more shaky. And if you're mounted, I would definitely recommend something like a lance, because it's effectively a great weapon that ignores the always strikes, or ignores the strike last rule. You can take a shield, take it, and then if you aren't a wizard, you can take light or heavy armor. And that will essentially allow you to keep your count a bit better protected. Otherwise, you're going to be relying on a ward and your inbuilt regeneration. Obviously, wizard to taste, you're going to need a wizard in your force. Although that, for a blood dragon, might be a necromancer. And you've got a host of special rules. So Dark Vitality, that means you can always march regardless of the Necromantic Undead special rule. You've got Indomitable 2, so you're helping whatever unit you're in stick around that bit more. Law of Undeath, to be able to take some very good spells that all vampires, or like vampire counts characters have access to. Regeneration 5 is very good, having as an inbuilt rule, because you can also get a ward. And then if you are actually in armor, you can start having 3 saves very easily, because regeneration is normally very hard to come by. So the Vampire Thrall, in comparison to a Count, is essentially just a lesser version, like Exalted Champion level, just above. You've got Weapon Skill 6, so again high. Strength 5, very good, because if you take a lance or chance a great weapon, you can essentially be the Strength 7 -2 that is pretty much the cap of any character outside of magic items. 2 wounds, initiative 5, 3 attacks. You can be upgraded here with, or to be a level 1 wizard at 30 points, as well as have 50 points magic, 50 points vampiric powers, and we'll go through those in a second. Finally, a Vampire Thrall can be upgraded to a BSB, and it replaces the hold that your ground with reducing unstable by D3. However, this isn't culminative with the Indomitable special rule. It's one or the other, so like whichever's higher. So I would recommend taking your banner somewhere else that's the White Lord, that's also going to provide benefits of unlocking different units within your core section that are pretty, when I say pretty core units, they're pretty base units for the Vampire Counts list. Finally, if you feel like taking your Blood Dragon Vampire, you can upgrade to a wizard and take armor. You just can't cast spells. So that will allow your vampire to get that 3-stack save when we get onto the magic items of armor, ward, and regen, whilst also being your army general. So that in itself allows you to be fairly tanky. Onto the magic items, we'll just flick through the book. We get the weapon section first, and I'm not going to do any of these in, or like all of them in massive detail. It's more the ones that stand out that I'll have a longer explanation on. So the Frostblade of 60 points, you get Killing Blow, and also if your enemy suffers any wounds, they must take an immediate toughness test. If failed, they gain strikes last and must reduce initiative to 1 for the remainder of the game. I think it's a bit expensive for that fishing for a 6. You've only got 4 attacks with a Vampire Lord, or Vampire Count, sorry, and I just don't think it's enough to always like bank on getting those 6s. If it was something like Monster Slayer along with it, it might have tempted me a bit more, but for 60 points I think it's a little bit steep. The Sword of Kings, 55 points. You've got Strength +1, AP -1, Killing Blow. The wielder of the Sword of Kings strikes a Killing Blow when they roll a 5 or 6, when they roll to wound rather than the usual 6. This is a bit more like it to me. It has that inbuilt AP -1 as well as Strength +1, so you'll be wounding Toughness 4 opponents on 2s if you're a vampire with Strength 5. The AP -1 is pretty standard across most hand weapons in a lot of the more combat-y factions by having, say, Gromril weapons or ensorcelled weapons. So the Frostblade being AP dash, I know it's got that strikes last thing, but I sort of start my baseline thinking at AP -1 for any combat characters. And I think the Killing Blow coming off on a 5 or 6 is it's in the realms of where I will start taking it. Blood Drinker for 45 points. This is the Blender Lord item that I was referencing before. So for 45 points, you get Strength User, AP -1, And whenever you cause one or more unsaved wounds during the combat phase, you recover a single lost wound. So that's across the entire phase, so will be got back at the end. You can't be putting this type of character with the Blood Drinker into massive or massively strong units. You put it into massive units, not into massively strong units that will expect to kill you in one round. So you can gain your wounds back, blend through a load of chaff. However, I don't think it's the greatest use of a Vampire Lord. It's just an option that is there. That has always sort of been a staple of vampires. Do you do the Blender Lord or the Challenge Lord? Next, we've got the Dreadlands for 40 points. Getting into the more Blood Dragon-y territory here. Or I suppose Von Karstein, they've always had lances. Basically, the Dreadlands is a normal lance. However, you may re-roll any failed rolls to hit while using it. For 40 points, it basically combines a Paymaster's coin, but is obviously every turn. Now, prefer the Paymaster's coin for re-rolling the hits on the turn that it really matters for 15 points over something like this 40-point Dreadlands. Because I think those points within your magical items limit are better spent elsewhere. Across the actual magic weapons list, I do think something like the Giant Blade is better than most of these. So if you are going magic weapons specifically, that's where I'd be looking, rather than the actual Vampire Counts magic weapons list. Or outside it, I suppose the Sword of Kings 5/6 killing blow could just come up clutch. It's just, that's my just sort of personal preference of it, because it's more leaning into the reliability of armies is what I tend to like to do, rather than fishing 4, 5s, and 6s. I prefer to do the multiple wounds. So onto magic armor, you've got the Flayed Hauberk. It's heavy armor, may be worn by a wizard without penalty. In addition, you've got a 6-up ward against any wound suffered. It's sort of good. It depends. If you want a vampire count that's your lord, and you want them to be casting spells while wearing heavy armor like a blood dragon, this is it. It's basically the question is, for 30 points to become level 1 and 4 points for a heavy armor, you can get this and gain a 6-up ward. However, that's eating into your magic items limit. Or you could just take level 1 heavy armor, forget about being a wizard. And obviously you can take level 2 on the vampire counts, right? But that's the sort of math, is, are you at your points limit for magic items and weapons and enchanted items? Or have you got the points to actually spend on this? Accursed armor for 30 points is infantry or cavalry only. It's a suit of full plate. In addition, you get +1 toughness, but suffer -1 weapon skill and initiative. Now, this is a real question. The full plate is obviously good. +1 toughness is excellent, going to toughness 6. However, it brings your weapon skill 7 on the count down, so hitting a lot of characters on 3s. It brings your count down to the hitting on 4s versus most other combat characters. And obviously they'll hit wizards on 3s, but do you trade the extra survivability of your count to be hit on 3s actually by like Chaos Lords and stuff versus the toughness addition? It's more of a Blender Lord item, I would say, but I'd be really wary of using it, because there's always that time that you generally is going to just be targeted. Now, obviously, this will stop you casting spells, so it's more of a setup where you're wasting the wizard level 1. So it's costing you that 30 points in addition if you put it on a Vampire Lord who is your actual general for purposes of the army as well. Talismans, you get the fabled Von Karstein ring for 40 points. It's vampire's only single use. When you die on a roll of a 2-up, the wound that killed you isn't lost. It's quite good. It's an additional wound on a 2-up for 40 points. So next is a bit of a red herring, I would say, is the Crown of the Damned for 35 points. Upon first comparison, to actually as a standalone magic item, I suppose. Comparison for a vampire count at least. A 4-up ward, very good. Combines well with your 5-up regen, as well as getting that fabled 3 saves in a row is very good. However, the stupidity that it causes you to suffer from, and your leadership, comparably low leadership of 8, means that you'll likely be stupid fairly often. So it's something that I personally would stay away from unless you can find some way of getting veteran on the Vampire Lord, which I've not yet found. Magic standards, you get the Banner of the Barrows, and this is where we get into me being really positive about the Vampire Counts magic items. 65 points, you get, during the combat phase, a unit carrying the Banner of the Barrows always hits on a 3+, regardless of the target's weapon skill. This is an excellent boost to Vampires units. It combines well with the Accursed Armor, because it means that your -1 weapon skill doesn't matter as much. Yes, you will get hit easier, but you're tanking it easier, still hitting on a 3+. So it is a way to mitigate that. It will also mean big units of comparably low weapon skill, Graveguard, Black Knights, have a much easier time getting those hits onto their enemies and utilising their cleaving blows by getting a lot of hits. So it's one that really works well into the army's strengths. The Drakenhof banner for 50 points. Basically, if your unit carrying the Drakenhof banner has Regeneration X, which a lot of things do in the Vampire Counts list, you improve the value of the regeneration save by 1. So your Vampire Lord or Thrall would now be on a regen of 4 up, which is definitely nothing to sniff at. So for 50 points, when we compare this to the Crown of the Damned at 35, causing stupidity, the Drakenhof banner, say on a Vampire Thrall, along with a Talisman of Protection, would be getting a 5-up, 4-up, as long with the rest of the unit gaining that benefit. The Screaming banner for 45 points. When an enemy unit needs to take a leadership test due to fear, it must roll an extra d6 and discard the lowest, so effectively more frequently causing your enemy to have -1 to hit you. Or if your enemy wants to charge you, they will just stop in their tracks much more easily. So an excellent banner for playing into your strengths as a vampire count. Finally, the Standard of Hellish Vigour for 40 points. This is absolutely must take. Like they're all very, very good. This is a must take, because the Standard of Hellish Vigour, meaning the unit carrying it gains a reserve move, goes a big way into your mobility as an army, especially if you've got a unit on the flank or something like that. Say a unit of Black Knights. It's how I was running my vampire count when I was looking into vampires to actually play with the army. I was taking the Hellish Vigour standard to mean that they were definitely mobile, so I could get them where I actually needed to be, rather than being ambling around and basically basing their mobility otherwise is based on getting spells off, which isn't incredibly reliable, because it's based on wizards, right? Next, we have the Helm of Commandment, Necromancers and Wights only, so I suppose we'll get to those characters in a second. During the command phase, you can enhance a unit around them, make a leadership test. If passed, you get plus D3 to your weapon skill for 40 points. Very good. Not obviously as good as the Banner of the Barrows, but it could be good defensively, or it is good defensively as well as offensively. And it's definitely good in to have in a unit around that you're not going to have your Banner of the Barrows in. So this would go in the other unit. Say you've got Black Knights with the Barrows, Helm of Commandment would go in the Graveguard. And I think, like, having said all those banners are great, at the point of banners, or even not the Flayed Hauberk, the Accursed Armor, then the banners, you will very quickly run out of points for magic items, and you'll have to be conscious not to fill up too much with magic items so that you can actually have an army to play with as well as these super buffed characters. Hand of Dust for 35 points, Necromancers only. It's a bound level 2, casting on a 9, so on average it will go off. Roll a d6 each time it's used on a 1, can't be used again. However, what it does, being an assailment, is the target enemy unit suffers 2d6 strength 5 hits, AP -1. So better than, off the top of my head, any other assailment spell that you're not investing more magic item points into anyway. So if you just sat your Necromancer in a pile of zombies, you can just keep doing the Hand of Dust and just absolutely ridding yourself of units. Also, if you've got a Blender Lord, this is where I would be putting my points into, along with the Blood Drinker Blade, because it will just mean you absolutely rinse through units while doing a lot of wounds and gaining wounds back. So you're just not going to be killed too easily. Cloak of Mist and Shadows for 30 points. It's Necromancer Infantry only. The bearer gains Ethereal, good for hanging around everywhere. Now, if you have enough units, you probably don't need this because you've only got 2 wounds as a character on its own. It's mainly going to be used when you're stood in the front of a block, don't want to get charged and singled out by a suicidal cavalry unit or just a cavalry unit that's going to allocate attacks into you. It's useful for that, but if you're at that point, I tend to go with the tactic of moving my Necromancer out of that unit anyway to protect them rather than investing these 30 points when I'm already going to be investing a lot of points into magic items in the vampires list. Next, we've got arcane items, and because so many of you characters are magicians and wizards, you're going to be able to use more of these arcane items than most other people who may not want to be taking a wizard lord, whereas you have access to a wizard lord. So the Skull Staff increased dispel range by 3 and apply +1 modifier to the dispel roll. Doesn't negate a horrendous fail miscast, but for 50 points, extending a level 4 Necromancer's dispel range to 27, and therefore having a 54-inch bubble of fuck off every other wizard. I think it's a very good item. It's not quite as good as the chaos item of roll 3d6, pick the 2 lowest for your enemy's casting, if anyone knows that one yet. But definitely a solid investment for magical defense. Next, onto the Scepter of Din Noirat. 35 points. The bearer of the scepter may attempt to resurrect the fallen using Invocation of Nehek twice during their command sub-phase rather than the usual once. Roll a d6 each time it's used. On a roll of 1, lose a wound. This is another, like the Banner of the Barrows, like the Hellish Vigor banner, Standard of Hellish Vigor. This is another one that I would say is near 100% necessary in pretty much every army. Because when we get to Invocation of Nehek, it will keep your units around longer, and doing it twice off one model for 35 points. Well, it's like having 2 models that can do it, except this is a 35-point item rather than 100 and something points for another model. Spell Familiar, 15 points, 0 to 1 per wizard. You know, an additional spell than is normal for their level of wizardry. 15 points, quite good. Obviously, you can't use it to gain an additional vampire count specific Law of Undeath, but it's solid. The Law of Necromancy, I think, is one of the solid, good laws of magic. So for 15 points, if you've got 15 points extra, is worthwhile to just get that additional spell. So I like it. It's all of this sort of second half of the magic items, I would say, are really solid. The first half have a few good ones in there, a few risky but good ones in there, and a couple of choices, and then one, the Frostblade, that I just don't think is worth it, really. Next, onto vampiric powers. So, vampires can have multiple vampiric powers. It's not like Bretonians that have to choose one virtue. However, each power can only be chosen once per army. So, 50 points, Curse of the Revenant, plus 1 wound. This makes your vampire count into 4 wounds, or 3 on a thrall. I'd definitely be putting this onto the army general. An additional wound, amazing. Like, I don't think I have to explain or wax lyrical about how good an extra wound is. If you have the Blood Drinker Blade for your... It's good on a Challenge Lord because you're not going to get cut down as easy. Good on your Blood Drinker Lord, your Blender Lord, because it just gives you more like sort of wound pool to fall back on as you're regaining 1 wound a phase. Beguile, 40 points. This is the Larmian bloodline type power. If you don't know what Larmians are or bloodlines are, definitely have a read of the Vampire 6th Codex. It's definitely available by PDF somewhere. And it just gives you good history of the vampire counts, that even though they're not fully fleshed out entirely, you can see references to it here. And yeah, Beguile is the Larmian one. Enemy units must make a leadership test before any rolls to hit against the vampire during this combat phase. If the test is failed, only natural 6s will actually hit. Better against chaff than it is against actual super damage dealing characters, because those characters tend to have good leaderships as well. And it's always been the problem with these sort of like Beguile powers is I don't think it's any good. I don't trust 40 points that they will fail that test. Flying Horror, 35 points. Turn into a bat. The vampire gains Fly 10 rule, but cannot join a unit. It's a shame that you don't gain Swift Stride on the Flying Horror special rule. When we get to the Strigoi vampires, you'll know why. This was always one that Strigoi types used to take. It's really nice, Fly 10, if you've got a lone vampire. It also allows you to march because it's fly, and flying ignores the Vampiric Undeath lack of marching. So it allows you to keep up with bat swarms and stuff and make a more killy blob that way. But I would have just liked to see Swift Stride or something here. Dark Alakite, 30 points. Necrarch style vampires come here. You've got your Invocation of the Heck, as you would from a Necromancer. Really, really useful. Your army's largely going to be utilising Invocation of the Heck no matter how you set it up. So for 30 points, very useful. And I think this is useful on any vampire type to be able to use this. It will also stack with the magic item of Scepter of Dinoirot to be able to do Invocation twice. So it allows you to just expand basically how hard your general is to kill, whilst also basically being a caster if you're going to set them up that way. The Master of the Black Arts, 30 points, can only be taken by a vampire count that's a level 2 wizard. Increase your wizard level by 1. 30 point, extra wizard level. I think it's 5 points less than the normal price to increase a wizard level. So good, again, Necrarch style there. 20 points for Supernatural Horror. Gain Terror special rules. Very good. It means that when you charge your opponent, they'll be taking a leadership test or run away. And whenever they're in combat with you and make a break test, -1 to their leadership, please. It's very good, and at only 20 points, pretty auto-include, I would say. And there's a few that I'd say were auto-include. If Dark Alakite, Supernatural Horror, and Curse of Revenant on your Lord, I think is probably the way to go, because it fits in your 100 points of Vampiric powers, makes him harder to kill, Invocation of the Heck on more things, and causing terror. It's a bit of a no-brainer for me, really. You've got Lord of the Night, 15 points, but that's me saying that as thinking of a Blood Dragon, because that's how I tend to set up my vampires. Lord of the Night, 15 points. You take a leadership test. If passed, a single unit of Fellbats, Bat Swarms, or Direwolves within 12 recovers D6 lost wounds. D6 is a fair amount to be recovering each time. However, Only having leadership 7 or 8 will mean it doesn't actually go off that often. So it's just something to balance, and I think it's worth the 15 points if you're going to be leaning into those units, which I think you want to lean in. You want at least a couple of Fellbats, Bat Swarms, or Dire Wolves. However, if you're going really heavy with them, you definitely want this, because they're your main speed flanking. Probably good, the Lord of the Night and Flying Horror to combine on a Thrall, to have a hitty accompaniment to your flanking forces that's fairly mobile, small based, so you can fit it into like different areas on the field. So a fairly good combo there as well. And with that, we'll go back into the characters section. So hopefully we've explained a little bit about the magic items that give you a thought of how to set up your vampires. And that comes down to the Combat Lord or Sorcerer Lord of what tree you want to go down. Combat Lords will be either Challenge Lords, of which I'd recommend obviously the Giant Blade, along with Talisman of Protection, and then Armor if you don't want to be a wizard. And that will make the most of your initiative, whilst also doing a bunch of damage and having protection of a armor 5+, 5+. If you want to do like blenderness, obviously I've said the Blood Drinker Blade, along with the Hand of Dust, just to get those more frequent blendiness number of attacks. And then for your Vampire Thrall, there's a good banner options, any of them, along with, as I said during the Vampiric Powers section, maybe the flanky Vampire Thrall. Can be a Lord as well, bit riskier. But the Vampire Thrall flanking that can have both the Master of Beasts one and the Fly special rule. So when it comes then to, let's get to the mounts. The mounts, there we go. You can mount them in sort of 4 different ways for the vampires. It's basically down to taste. I tend to like mine on a Nightmare, just because it fits the theme of being on a horse for Mausolon. So a bit of a no-brainer. It allows you to keep up with your Black Knights or even your Blood Knights if you want a really expensive but massively killy unit. You've got the Coven Throne, and is essentially heavy chariot. Has got 5 wounds. However, here you get an additional 4 attacks at strength 5 from your Pallid Handmaidens, which are vampire handmaidens. Your Spirit Horde, which is D6 random number of attacks. So it's less killy than a dragon as a mount. However, what you will get in return for being less killy is Dark Vitality, so you can always be marching. And I know dragons can fly, but with the Falcon Horn of Friedmund out there, it's not always a guaranteed. You've got First Charge, so you actually can be adding that to the charge of another unit to ignore ranks. So say you charge this in alongside some Graveguard that have got a full sort of static combat res bonus. It can be really beneficial to you actually winning those combats. Fly 8, so it is maneuverable. Ghoulish Glamour, which is take a leadership test, or your enemy must take a leadership test before rolling to hit. If failed, only natural 6s will hit. So it's essentially that Larmian power of Beguile, except it's just based on a Coven Throne. You've got D6 plus 1 impact hits like a Heavy Chariot, Necromantic Undead like everything, Regen 6, however you've got a Regen 5 anyway and that won't stack, and Scrying Pool, which is a bound level 2, casting value 9, so on average it will go off, and you can reroll any naturals 1s to hit until the start of your next turn. So it's fairly good. 210 points it's quite expensive, but for an additional 5 wounds to be added to your vampire, and it's a good buff unit rather than an out and out killer unit that, say, like a vampire dragon is going to end up in. Next, we get on to, if I can remember this page 9. So the Abyssal Terror, 120 points. You are getting 4 additional wounds on the Abyssal Terror, so only 1 less than the Coven Throne. You've got movement 6, so not shabby at all. Weapon skill 4, strength 5 with 3 attacks. So overall, less attacks than the Coven Throne got. However, what you do get included in that is Wicked Claws, so AP -2. A Poisonous Tail, which makes 1 attack per turn with it, with strike first and poisoned attacks. Strength 5 is quite good, not the absolute best though. You've got Close Order, Fly 9, so 1 faster than the Coven Throne. Necromantic Undead, obviously. Stomp attacks D3. Is that worth it versus the Coven Throne's D6 +1? Not too sure. And you come with Terror inbuilt as standard here. So that would save you the 20 points on the Vampiric power. As a more budget option to a larger mount, I do think it's quite good. But obviously comparing it to a Coven Throne, which is 210, it's not going to be like, oh, this is so much better, all the stats are better. The 4 wounds on the Abyssal Terror is actually not too shabby. It's only 1 less than the dragon. And the +1 toughness is going to result in the same toughness as being on the dragon. So I actually think it's quite a good budget option because it's 70 points less for only 1 less wound. So you're going to end up on 7 wounds, which is nothing to sniff at. You're going to have half the base size, so easier to sneak round units. So I actually do quite like it as an option. And when combined with the fact it's only got heavy armor, but it's the heavy armor the same that will allow you to cast spells. The same as, say, a blood dragon that's taking heavy armor and not able to cast spells. Well, just take this. And it will allow you to do that with ward and regeneration, and has a few stacks to make it very survivable. So I do actually quite like this as a budget option. It's a shame that the Vampire Thrall can't take an Abyssal Terror, because it would make a good sort of mid-tier, like lesser dragon option that you don't have to risk your count on all the time, when actually, because I'm quite conservative when I've everything playing vampire counts in 6th, and now I'm quite conservative, especially because it's on a monstrous creature, it can be picked out. But that's the same problem as we'll get on the Coven Throne and the Zombie Dragon. So maybe don't take me too seriously with that exact one. Onto the Zombie Dragon, it's 215 points. You've got Weapon Skill 4, Strength 6 and 5 attacks are the main differences between the Zombie Dragon and the Abyssal Terror on the actual stats wise. You've got double the size base, essentially, so it's a bit harder to hide. You gain full plate rather than heavy armor, so with a shield and a lance, you'll be on a 3-up rather than a 4-up that you'd be on with an Abyssal Terror, so quite good. You've got Wicked Claws again, so that's AP -2, but don't have to dedicate one of your attacks to a stupid poison tail. And you've got Pestilential Breath, which is Strength 2, which is bad, right? You're wounded on 5s. However, it's AP -3 breath weapon. So actually very good. It's in 6th was the same and used to pay off all the time. Now, Carrion Feeders means that enemy units engage with this model suffer -1 to their initiative, which, when you want to keep your Lord alive, is very good. If you... Well, I don't know why you wouldn't be taking... I don't know why you wouldn't be taking a lance, but if you do take a great weapon for some reason, or if you're not taking the giant blade, means that you're closer to striking first with the great weapon, and also obviously plays into your hands at being initiative 6, because it will mean you strike before most enemy lords, who are obviously initiative 6, sometimes 7 on the very higher end. The only ones that you still won't be striking first for elves, and I wouldn't really ever expect to anyway. So, is it good? Yes, dragons are good. Needless to say, the Stomp Attack D6 is very nice for just adding more combat res and killing things. Yeah, it's good, right? Now, one thing to watch for, though, with these zombie dragons abyssal terrors is a unit with full static combat res that you don't just like kill all of before initiative 1, so do get to start striking you. Those wounds can be whittled away quite fast, and for every wound that you lose, you're losing out on combat res. And basically you can start taking wounds if you just fluff a turn's attacks, which can be absolutely devastating for a general. However, that Indomitable 2 should save you from the worst of it if you've just had a middling turn. But it is something to watch out for. Be mindful of what units you actually do charge into. And it's just something I thought I'd point out as we went through the guide. So next up, we get to the Necromancers. And this is where we go through the lore of undeath as well. Obviously, the lore of undeath comes into it when you're setting up your vampire as well, but Necromancers are the obvious place to go through it. So both of them fairly standard wizards, except the Master Necromancer, toughness 4, so 1 more than a normal human, and the 3 wounds rather than the 2 of the Alakite level. 130 points is a fairly reasonable price to be starting with the extra things that you have, and you can be upgraded to level 4 or 2 for 30 points each. Right, what to say about these? I would say you want as many as you can squeeze into the army after your lord is kitted out, essentially. And you're going to be running into that points cap on characters a fair number of times, I reckon. Invocation of Nehek that comes on Necromancers, and I think you should be going for on your lord as well, unless you've got some sort of fluff reason to not to, is during the command phase of your turn, if you're not engaged in combat, your character may attempt to resurrect the fallen by making a leadership test. If passed, a single friendly unit that has the Necromantic Undead within 12 of the character regains a number of lost wounds based on this table, right? If it's infantry, wizard level plus D3. If it's swarms, wizard level plus 1. If it's monstrous infantry, heavy cavalry, monstrous cavalry, light chariot, it's the level of the character's wizardry. And if the unit's troop type is heavy chariot, monstrous creature or behemoth, it recovers a single wound. Now, the one that is most likely going to benefit you in terms of points wise is the monstrous infantry and monstrous cavalry and heavy cavalry one, and that's because you can start like resurrecting your blood knights. What it can't do is create more models than existed in that unit when it actually started the game, except for zombies. And zombies don't cost that many points. I'd sparingly use it on zombies personally. Like, obviously you can get a unit up and up and up, but at leadership 7, it's going to take you a lot of zombies to get you 60 points back for the Necromancer that you could have just invested into zombies. Now, I'm not saying that it's never worth it, and if you're lacking for something else to do, you might as well put it into the zombies as not do Invocation of Nehek. But it's just something to think about. Think about the points cost of the units that you're doing it. Even if a zombie unit gets wiped out because you didn't invocation it, it might have been worth losing that versus losing the skeletons that you can't create a new unit of, or losing another Blood Knight that's going to do a lot of damage and tip combats into your favour. So onto the lore of Undeath is solid, actually. You got Van Haal's Dance Macabre, which is an 8 to 12 plus, a 12-inch range. If you cast on an 8 plus, one of either movement, weapon skill, or initiative gains a D3 modifier until your next start of turn phase. And if it's a 12 or more, 2 of the movement, weapon skill, initiative go up by D3. Incredibly good and swingy in games. It's a shame you can't take multiple of these per caster. Hellish Vigor, 9 plus, 12 plus. If it's a casting value of 7 or more, so a 9, whichever's right when we get the FAQ on that. You gain the reserve move special rule. This is why having the banner is important, because like a level 2 is, you need it to come off a lot, right? To get the 12 plus off, or the 10 plus off, depending on which one it is, you gain everyone in a bubble of the command range from the caster gains the reserve move. And you might just have these popping off across the table. In fact, it's quite likely, because it's very useful to have reserve move in the Vampire Count army. However, I do still think you need that banner just ensuring that you have reserve move at least on that one unit where you really need it. Especially because that can't be dispelled, right? Raise Dead, another good one. And these are all enchantments. Casting value 10 plus, range 12, place a unit of 2d3 risen zombies anywhere within 12, but not within 1 inch of an enemy model. And it's a zombie. It's a zombie stat line. So you can create new units of zombies and then immediately Invocation of Nehek them to get big units of, or bigger units of zombies. So it's incredibly useful for redirecting charges. This is possibly the most annoying as an opponent to play against. If you're playing a victory points battle in the last turn, if you've got a Necromancer, res on that victory point, incredibly useful for both redirecting charges and winning games of victory points. And just generally being annoying and flank charging things. There can't be enough said. The uses are limited to your imagination, I think, is the best way to say that. So next, and what would I mount them on? Now, I don't think it matters too much. I don't really think you want these to be on Abyssal Terrors, Zombie Dragons, the Mortis Engine and Nightmare potentially. Like, Nightmares will keep you a bit safer and allow you to join units of Knights if you want to get into units of Knights. However, I more think you'd want to just stay on Cavalry, hang around other units, and get that bit of extra range for your other spell casting is the main purpose of the Nightmare, I would think there. The Mortis Engine, you are... Come on, Mortis Engine, where are you? So the Mortis Engine, 195 points, 5 wounds for the Chariot, and you've got 3 Banshees and a Spirit Horde on there. You are Accursed Reliquary, which is, whilst in this model's command range, Necromantic Undead, gain +1 movement and initiative. Very useful. Blasphemous Tome, which all wizards, friend and foe, apply +1 casting rolls while within this model's command range. However, if you miscast, you must roll twice on the miscast table and apply both results. Fairly here or there. You've got Dark Vitality, so you can always march. Close Order, useful. First Charge, useful for just throwing into a unit to break the enemy's static combat res. Is a bit of a force multiplier that way. Fly, so that you can always march. I wouldn't think you'd want to get too far away from behind your battle line with this. You've got Regeneration 6, which isn't the best, and Wailing Dirge. So what Wailing Dirge is basically the Banshee's attack from elsewhere in the hero section. And what that does is, whilst if you're within 8 of an enemy unit, they must take one enemy unit of your choosing that you've got line of sight to, or are engaged in combat with, they've got to take a leadership test at -2 and lose the difference in wounds. So quite useful. For the Mortis Engine, I do think it's quite good. It slightly increases your movement. It's not too shabby for that. However, for the same points, I can get another level 4 Necromancer, which to me is the better choice for getting those bubbles of reserve move, for being able to create newly risen dead more often, and for using Invocation of Nehek more often. So if you're going to put your points into this, my personal choice, even though I quite like it, would be more Necromancers. And that's going to be something that I would recommend quite a lot. A lot of the time, when I was writing lists for vampire accounts, I'm looking at sort of 2, 3, well, not even 2, minimum 2, but 3 or 4 necromancers of as high level as you can afford in that list, whilst also not sacrificing on your vampire count, but so that essentially my army can reliably march. I can create new units because I need 2 necromancers to be able to both hellish vigor and raise new units. So I need 2 for that because I can't swap out multiple spells. So that then, well, I want 2 goes at being able to march, and I want 2 goes at raising dead. So then that leads me to like 3, 4 necromancers. Next we get Strigoi Ghoul Kings for 145 points. So they are infantry. They know magic to whatever level you purchase. And they can take battle magic, dark magic, or necromancy, of which I really like necromancy out of that list personally. They've got dark vitality with flammable, so you're ignoring your regen if the enemy has flaming weapons. Hatred all enemies, which is very useful. You are 1 less weapon skill than a vampire count, which is a bit annoying. However, you have got that initiative 7 and 5 attacks to make use of that hatred. The leadership 8 is necromantic undead, lore of undeath, poisoned attacks is okay. However, with the strength 5, well, I could just be taking a vampire count with a lance. The hunger. Now, the hunger is when you inflict 1 or more unsaved wounds, roll a d6 on a 6, recover a wound. Blood Drinker as a magic item, sort of better for a Blender Lord style character, in my personal opinion, because I don't think that 6 is going to come off enough. Because it's only if you inflicted 1 or more unsaved wounds, roll once. When you make a pursuit roll a single d6 rather than 2 d6. And at that point, I think this really kills the Ghoul King character when they're on foot. Now, this is why I said the fly special rule would have been nice if it had Swift Stride, so you could add that additional dice and still be pursuing 2d6 rather than the 1d6. One way that you can actually save the Ghoul King, I would say, is by putting them on a Terrorgeist. So what does a Terrorgeist do, I hear you ask? A Terrorgeist, basically, an Abyssal Terror. Yeah, I did get that right. I just wanted to double check the name. An Abyssal Terror, when taken as a character mount, it's movement 6, weapon skill 3, with 4 attacks, strength 5, so not too shabby. It's toughness +1, wounds +5, so an additional wound over the Abyssal Terror, the same as a zombie dragon, actually. It's got Filthy Encrusted Talons, that's -1 AP, Armor Bane 1, poisoned attacks, so more of a blender style because of the poisoned attacks. However, it's missing out on the wicked claws that dragons and Abyssal Terrors get. You've got the Rancid Maw, -2 AP, with multiple wounds too. However, only 1 of its attacks can be made with this. So it brings it back a bit towards being able to chomp someone, but I'd still lean towards the dragon or the Abyssal Terror if I was going to be making a Blender Lord, to be honest, and I wanted them mounted. It's got light armor, which is the only armor that your Strigoi can actually take. Infested, which is when a model loses its last wound, every unit in base contact suffers d6 strength 2 hits, AP -1. I don't want that character to die. If I'm taking those, if I'm not taking it as my general, it's not too bad, but it's still a large points investment that the special rule doesn't actually do that much when they die. It's only strength 2 hits. It's very meh. Regen 5 up, quite good. I suppose that's more in relation to the normal Terrorgeist rather than the Vargulf, rather than the Strigoi. D6 stomp attacks, quite good. Wailing Dirge. Now, this is what we this is the payoff of the Terrorgeist, because that's the leadership test at -2 for the enemy unit. and take wounds equal to the difference. And you can do that while you're in combat. However, it doesn't count towards your combat res. It will certainly strip down units. However, I just don't think it is as good, even if it's less points, than a zombie dragon or something like that. I'd potentially even just take the Abyssal Terror if I was going to take the Vargulf mount. Next, we've got Wights. So Wights are fairly solid. The first thing to say about them, I think, is that they're a cheap hero choice that unlocks either Black Knights or Graveguard as a core choice. And because you don't have any 1+ units in your Vampire Count's army, it's great for list building in whatever direction that you want. Like, I always remember the back of book lists for 6th where you could take like Bat Swarms and stuff for your Strigoi, or your Blood Knights would all be made up of just Graveguard and Black Knights in the core rather than skeletons. That does allow you to do that, and do it bringing a Wight, either King or Lord, will allow you to unlock the Graveguard or Black Knights as core, so you don't need to rely on more chaff units to fill the entirety of your core's 25% points. Though I would still recommend some of the chaff units. It can take either an additional hand weapon or a great weapon, lance, shield, maybe mounted. Obviously, that's to taste. Though because it's not going to be your general and is a very cheap character, 85 points for the White King or 40 points only for the White Lord, I think you can get away with that great weapon more. Because they're toughness 5, so a respectable toughness. And even the White Lord is strength 4, the White King 5, so makes the great weapon a great weapon, because you're not worried about you losing your Lord before they get to strike, or your army crumbling if they do. Obviously, if you're mounted, I would recommend a lance, because it allows you to use that initiative 4, which is one of the better ones in your army, as well as stacking with any necromancers that might have buffed your initiative to actually allow you to actually go first, which is a massive cause for celebration in an undead army. Now, both of these characters have the Killing Blow special rule, which is a good little addition. It follows on from the Graveguard, and I believe Black Knight's is Cleaving Blow special rules, and it's just the one up from that, right? So if you were taking Graveguard, I'd just splash out on the 40 points, right, and take the White Lord, because why not get them in core anyway, and then they don't eat up your special. The White Banner changes the hold your ground to the same as the Vampire Thrall, and this is where I'm more likely to actually take it, because at 40 points versus the Vampire Thrall's 75, and I'm not tempted to invest more into wizard levels and then not having armor. It's just a very cheap battle standard bearer that is a solid investment, because toughness 5 on a battle standard bearer is a boon. Finally, you've got Tomb Banshees for 90 points. You've got movement 6, your strength toughness 3, 2 wounds, 1 attack, leadership 6. And why would you be taking this? Like, why? Well, it's because you've got Ethereal, so you can only be hurt by magical attacks. You've got indomitable magical attacks, undead, regen, blah, blah, blah. You cause terror, which is very good. You can just declare charges into low leadership units, and they might just run, even though you've got a low unit strength as an infantry model that's on their own. They've also got Wailing Dirge, which is the Vargulf and Mortis engines. No, the Vargulf and Coven Throne special rule. So it's a leadership check, and at -2, and they lose the wounds in the difference. They're good little units to just have dotted about the table, just because their base size is small and they fit in lots of places and can just scream at people, and people just start dropping like flies. Even if you just if you scream at some knights and they lose a knight, do that for 6 turns, because you're Ethereal, just play them a bit smart, the Tomb Banshee a bit smart. It can get its points back very easily. The one thing that I think you're going to be running up against, though, is just that heroes and characters cap, or the characters cap. It's going to be eating up a lot of your points, and investing 90 points into a single model when actually you might need some more points into your actual ranked up units and big blocks, because this is more a sprinkling on top if you do have some additional points left over. And they're nice models. They've always been fairly solid rules wise. It's just because it's in that hero section, it is just another single model. It's just something to think about when you list building, because it is very easy to overdo it with all the characters that are available to you. So the first actual infantry that we'll go on to in the main list, it can be core, it can be special. It's the Grave Guard. At 11 points a model, you get weapon skill 3, movement 4, strength and toughness 4, which is very good, especially for 11 points. 1 wound, initiative 3, meh. 1 attack, leadership 7, and he's got heavy armor, shields, and looks fairly rubbish. However, when you get a big block of them, I say looks fairly rubbish, looks fairly solid from the stat line with strength, toughness 4, but I don't know. They're not going to be... You lose something when you die, right, and become a skeleton. So you lose slightly out on weapon skill. But a big unit of them can be really solid. You can replace the shields with great weapons. So that's making the unit that would be similar to a Storm of Chaos great swords style, Sylvanian great swords. Or even, I suppose, Bretonian foot knights with great weapons. It's just a nice little option. However, because of cleaving blow, meaning that any 6 to wound will ignore armor saves, sort of you want to pile on a lot of attacks anyway. So having a big front rank that's going to be striking at, I know it's only initiative 3, but at initiative 3 that you can increase with Necromancer powers and the Law of Undeath, if you have that on your Lord, can be very useful to just get more attacks in and go for the cleaving blows. You've got close order, so your combat res. I know close order is fairly standard across a lot of units now. Indomitable 1, decent for just reducing those incoming wounds, and regeneration 6. They got it. I definitely take full command on these. You want a nice solid unit. I'd start at, say, well, at least 21, if not 28 in 4 ranks of 7, because these are the real anvil of your army, I would say. And that's played into with having the implacable defense special rule for 1 point a model for 1 unit per 1,000 points. And that means if you're in close order, which you always will be as this unit, because it's got no other option than just a regular order, when you give ground, instead of moving backwards, you just stop where you are. So they can anchor a flank and be very near a board edge and just not run off the board. And it can also mean it's just a dependable battle line that you know isn't actually moving on the table, despite losing as many combats as you want. A big unit allows you to absorb incoming wounds when your enemy's hardest unit runs into them, and then you've got a chance to res them back up with your Necromancers. They can also have drilled on that 1 unit per 1,000 for 2 points a model. Obviously can get expensive with big units there, like up to 80 points. Drilled is a very good rule. And although you can't march to do the triple march, it's good for just playing about with your width and your depth of your unit, so that you can always be getting the maximum combat res, adding and subtracting based on how many opponents you are going to be facing. If you've got 1 unit versus your opponent's 3, you can expand your frontage so that you're not going to get flanked and therefore more easily ganged up on and broken by your enemy. If you're facing 1 unit, you can go for more combat res statically. Just an incredible rule, I would say. And finally, you can have magic standard worth up to 50 points. So you can have any of those but the Banner of the Barrows. Having the Drakenhof banner to mean that they've all got a 5-up regeneration is very good, I think. Magic items on the seneschal, I never really do anything like that personally. Just think it's too much over-investment into a 1-wound unit champion, so I don't do that in any army, but especially in vampire counts where you're going to be investing a lot into magic items anyway. I'd go for more bodies at the point where you actually get to the list. Next, we get onto Skeleton Warriors for 5 points a model. Now you've got Weapon Skill 2, Ballistic Skill 2, obviously. You're not going to be using that Ballistic Skill. You've got Strength Toughness 3, 1 wound, Initiative 2, 1 attack, and Leadership 5, though you don't care about Leadership, right? Now you can take Thrusting Spears for 1 point a model to go along with your light armor and shields. I think that is a definite take on Skeleton Warriors. And that is because I think you want a really big unit of Skeleton Warriors. I know I sort of flippantly threw out 40 for the Graveguard, but when I was playing vampire counts in test games, I was using 40 Skeleton Warriors in 4 ranks of 10. And they were very solid because with spears they get 20 attacks or 21 with the champion, enough to absorb a lot of damage. And they were just really, really dependable that someone just had to do something about them rather than me having to worry too much about what my enemy was doing. With the Horde special rule, meaning that you get +3 rank bonus, along with Close Order for a 4 static combat res, Standard Bearer 5, and then adding 21 attacks to that. It's a very solid unit that, even at 40 models, is only actually 215 points for all of those with a solid amount of wounds. So I think there's definitely a reason to take these alongside Graveguard. Definitely think there's a reason to take Graveguard in addition to Skeleton Warriors. I don't think they compete too much for that slot. Now, one that is another comparison with these infantry types, Skeleton Warriors to zombies. Is it worth taking zombies? So 3 points a model, 2 points or 3 points cheaper than a skeleton with a spear, you get a zombie. And these are the real chaff. You've got Close Order and Horde to get a 4 static combat res, Necromantic Undead, yeah, regen 6, and the newly risen dead. So that means they can be taken beyond their starting number of wounds with total within the unit. So you can gain additional models into that unit. I think it's definitely worth having at least one unit, because one unit, say, let's just use 40 again, or let's say 20, let's say 28. So that's 4 ranks of 7, which I think is a nice mid-level unit number now, is 28. With that, in your first turn, if you take no casualties, your Invocation of Nehex aren't wasted and you can get more of them. They're easy to res across the game, and also for 28 is going to be less than 100 points, and you can just throw them into enemy units or in the way of bigger units and not care if they die that much. These are your classic redirectors that you just don't care about. Now, I wouldn't recommend taking a standard bearer with this unit. Although you can res new models into it to try and make it not die, you don't want to be tied to doing that just so you don't lose a standard. You're also never going to really, I would say, expect to win a combat with zombies. That's not what they're there for. They're there to lose the combat and just die, and you don't care about them across the entire game. So would I take a standard bearer for 5 points or nearly 2 extra zombies? Well, I'd take 2 more zombies for that and not give away 50 points when I lost that standard or have to worry about preserving that standard. Next infantry we've got is Crypt Ghouls. Now, these are slightly faster than your other choices. You've got movement 5, weapon skill 3, strength 3, toughness 4, so on the better side of toughness, 1 wound, 2 attacks each, and at 9 points a model. You can upgrade 1 to the champion, which has got 3 attacks, and that ties into the fact that the Crypt Ghouls have poisoned attacks. They've got move through cover, so they're good for preventing flankers from using woods to get round and through your battle line. And also, you don't care too much about your rank bonus being ignored. You can use skirmishers to really not care about your rank bonus until you've dealt with enemy skirmishers. And then because of open order, if you kill your enemy skirmishers with all your poisoned attacks, you use the free reform from running down or restraining after an overkill, reform into a ranked up unit, and now you can break the enemy's flank or break their rank bonus by charging them in the flank. So it's just incredibly useful. They got reserve move to be that bit faster than all the rest of your army, just inbuilt into them. And I think it's a really solid unit to just be taking a few units of that minimum unit size of 10 to definitely take on other skirmishers. And then as the unit gets bigger, you can start ploughing them into more chaff units to help out your Blender Lord and things like that. Next, we are on to the Crypt Horrors, and this is actually an ogre level infantry, right? You've got movement 6, weapon skill 3, strength 4, toughness 5, 3 wounds, initiative 2, 3 attacks for 46 points a model, so on the expensive side. You've got filthy crusty claws, which are AP -1 poison attacks, so actually quite a solid AP value for vampire counts in general, which up till now haven't really had much AP within their normal units, even though I suppose Graveguard have had the killing blow that is able, or the cleaving blow that is able to ignore armor saves. You've got move through cover, open order, regen 6, and stomp attacks 1, so you've effectively got 3 attacks that you roll into hit with and 1 that auto hits. Now, if you were taking like a Strigoi themed army, I think they're worth it. Or they're definitely like good in there. The toughness 5 is quite good. However, I don't personally like this unit in my own setup for the game. I can see its uses, but I think you've got better things that can do the role. If you're out of cover and difficult terrain, I think you've definitely got better units within the standard list. And in cover, I actually quite like Crypt Ghouls over these for piling on more attacks. For a comparison, you can have 4 Crypt Ghouls for the same amount of points, and those 4 Crypt Ghouls are getting 8 attacks rather than the 3 attacks of the Crypt Horror. You're also, with the 4 Crypt Ghouls, going to be a higher unit strength to make that fear go off more often. And yes, you're gaining a toughness. The strength is by the by because you're going for poisoned attacks and just going into chaff. And yes, you won't get all of those Crypt Ghouls in, but it means that you can just get more wounds here and there into the unit, soak a charge in a combat that you might lose a tiny bit better. And it's just my personal feeling of the Crypt Horrors versus Ghouls that I prefer the Ghouls, actually. In comparison to the Crypt Horrors, are the Vargheists on the next page. You've got 61 points for a slightly inverted Crypt Horror. You've got weapon skill 4, which is 1 better than the Crypt Horror, strength 5 rather than strength 4, toughness 4 rather than strength 5. You've got initiative 4, so you're 1 better, 3 attacks, and you've got wicked claws that are AP -2. And that is really good, I would say, because it's at initiative. And as we'll get into in a second, you've got things that will benefit you from getting into the side of enemy units that will mean that you're getting +4 initiative bonus on the charge rather than +3 if you're in that flank, obviously. You've got Dark Vitality, so that you can always march. And movement 6 means that you're not going to be grounded too easily. You've got Fly 9, which Fly 9, so you're going 18 inches a turn, is incredible. You've got Frenzy, so when you do set yourself up by getting within charge range and move into the side of an enemy unit, know that you are going to be charging next turn. You just want to give yourself a good number of units to charge so that you can pick which one, and your enemy most likely has to sacrifice one of the units. So just know that the skirmishers rule that you've got here isn't always the best thing for you, because if you skirmishers, you can charge 360, so you actually weirdly have less control of the unit. If you deploy in a block rather than in skirmishers, you can both break ranks and you can angle yourself away from things that you don't want to charge rather than being forced into it with a skirmish formation. Not saying that you always want to do that, but it is just something to think about to offset and mitigate that frenzy, because with a fly 9 and therefore a maximum charge range of 15 inches, you're going to be popping frenzy a lot. Next, we'll get onto the other flying units. They're actually a comparison to these Vargeist. You've got the Bat Swarms. So this is another option for flankers like Crypt Ghouls, and you've got 39 points for a base. You've got Fly 7 because your movement's 1. So if you get Falconhorn to Freemunded, they're moving 1. You've got Strength Toughness 2, 5 wounds, 5 attacks, and Initiative 4. So not actually that bad of an initiative. You've got Skirmishers, so you don't have to actually move around, but mainly the benefit here is the fly and a big pool of wounds to just get into the enemy with. You will be crumbling when you lose that combat, so they've lost out a bit if they actually just had the normal like swarm and rules and stuff. But I do think there's a definite use to this unit. Just being able to put a ton of attacks into a lower toughness unit and having a simple access to fly is quite good. Now, comparison to that though, we've got Fellbats, which for 15 points each are 2 wounds. So for comparative wound values, you've got 45 points for 6 in the Fellbats, though obviously that's on multiple bases. You've got higher strength and toughness, 6 attacks rather than 5 attacks, at a weapon skill of 3. You've got Fly 10, so you're actually going to be 6 inches a turn faster than the Bat Swarms, as well as Swift Stride built in, so even faster on the charge. This is actually where I would prefer to be putting my flying units. So Fellbats, I think, are my choice over Bat Swarms, though obviously there's something with Bat Swarms into having this condensed number of attacks that you might want to put into a wizard to just pile attacks onto a single wizard, because your Bat Swarms will be able to, with 2 bases, fit 2 of them, so that's 10 attacks into base contact with an enemy wizard in a unit and just pile attacks on there. So it is quite a good use for them. However, just against most things and War Machine hunting, I do think Fellbats are the superior choice. So outside of that very specific reason that I can think of off the top of my head, Fellbats are my choice. I think they both have different uses to the Vargeist, so it's not going to require a direct comparison to them. It's obviously just within the flying units section, because Fellbats and Bat Swarms you're going to have full control over, whereas the Vargeist are very much a shock infantry, or a shock monstrous infantry, rather than this flanking thing, because they've got frenzy and you can't control them. Next, we go on to the Spirit Hosts. These are swarms, which are movement 6, strength toughness 3, weapon skill 3 with 4 attacks. You've got 4 wounds, and at 49 points, you're like, well, why do I want these? Well, it's because you've got Ethereal. And that is an incredibly good rule for meaning that you don't get hurt by anything except magical attacks. So they're very good for just tying up units. You've got obviously a limited unit size here, like you do in zombies, and you're like, oh, why? It's because the only way that a lot of units are going to kill you is through just having static combat res. So it relies on you fluffing a number of attacks and then just being slowly whittled down by combat res. It is what it is, really. Now, what they can do is, with the Bound Spirits rule, they are disciplined rather than undisciplined, which most swarms are, so can use the hold you ground as the battle standard. So they can reduce the number of wounds they take from the combat res by the D3 that your battle standard bearer is going to cause. So it's a good rule for them to have, because that's going to be the main source of damage if you play them right. They're not going to be throwing out loads of damage, however, with their weapon skill 3, strength 3. Yes, they've got 4 attacks for a base, but their main role here is to be blocking things like even heavy cavalry that might only have a banner. If you put a unit of spirit hosts into them, if they've got no magical weapons, no one cares. Just be careful for, say, like chaos units that have ensorcelled weapons that will just absolutely rip through these with a combination of combat res as well as being able to actually damage them. Oh, my drawer's open. So next we go on to the cavalry section, and this is where we get into it a bit more, I think. Let's start off with direwolves, and we'll work our way up in the knight section. We will end on hex wraiths because that's a bit of a different one than other normal cavalry. We've got direwolves, which are your standard fast cav type unit, but with a vampire counts twist, right? Your 8 points, which is cheap. You've got movement 9, so very fast, though obviously you won't be able to march. What you have to offset that is the reserve move, so you'll move in the shooting phase. One thing to be mindful of when you're doing this is if you take a magic missile, it does allow you to open up gaps in your opponent's line, especially if you're being blocked by the direwolves, by skirmishers or light cavalry that you can easily take out a low number of models and sort of like create a gap with. So you'd move up to, say, some skirmishers, destroy that unit of skirmishers with a mixture of banshee whales and magic missiles, and then move through with your reserve move and you're through the enemy line. You've got open order, and obviously that will allow you to change direction at the end of both your move and then reserve move. You've got slavering charge for +1 strength on the charge to go along with strength 3 that most other war beasts have, so your strength 4, so that's a very solid addition to the unit. Toughness 3 is standard for light cavalry, right? And being fearless is really good for light cavalry. One thing to note, that you're not going to be able to do the usual trick of running away and returning with this unit, so you will just lose them if they get caught out of position. I wouldn't be worried too much about that with like taking a unit of 5 for 40 points and just knowing that you'll lose it isn't too bad. It's definitely not a massive downside, especially because you've got the reserve move, you're still marching, you're going 18 inches a turn. They are a brilliant unit, I would say. Last one, they've got Vanguard, so they can do a single move of the 9 inches before the game starts, so they're even faster. So realistically, you're going 27 inches on the first turn. It means you can be in your enemy's deployment zone, or you can be, even if you move through cover each time, you're going to be going 24 inches and be on their line. So if there is a gap in the enemy lines and you drop these direwolves down, it means that you can get through it. So it might be worth saving a unit till the end of your deployment. Now, on the flip side to that, I'm going to tell you to do the exact opposite, because there is also a benefit to them, and you can have multiple units to do both. A 40-point unit that you can just throw down, and it's got high movement, so it can reposition at the end, but you just throw down the unit and see what your enemy is doing. There's a lot to be said for that during deployment, because that will allow you to place what the rest of your army, which is largely slower units, you can place those down after you've seen more of your opponent's battle plan. So minimum 2 units, I'd say, of direwolves just for that trick. And then going up into 3, you can do the reserve move when you've spotted a hole in your enemy's line, and it's only cost you 120 points, which is about the same points as a Bretonian mounted yeoman unit. It's the same points as a Chaos Marauder horse unit with musician and champion, so, and that's getting 2 more attacks than you, and the musician is, why do you care, you necromantic undead? So it's just a very, very good unit that's an absolute gem in this list, I would say. Next, we've got the Black Knights, and for 24 points a model, you get a weapon skill 3, strength toughness 4, 1 wound, initiative 3, 1 attack, basically Graveguard on horse. You've got hand weapon, heavy armor, shield, and can take a lance and barding for 2 points a model. Like, you can take both of those options at once. So it makes you 28 points a model if you take both of them. Of note now, the barding doesn't decrease your movement. If you're used to 6th edition, where barding did, don't bother looking for the rule. It isn't a thing anymore. And I think these are very good. They come with Cleaving Blow, so on a 6, they will just ignore your opponent's armor and auto wound. Or on a 6 to wound, they'll do that. They've got Close Order, First Charge, Necromantic Undead, Regeneration 6, and Swift Stride. Now, here is where, with full command in any unit bigger than, say, 6 models, I'd say take full command. I would have at least 1 unit with Hellish Figure, the standard of Hellish Figure, because that will mean that your Black Knights can get to flank. So they don't need to be hovered around with by a Necromancer who doesn't actually want to march themselves, because they might want to cast a magic missile. Yeah, I think it's really worthwhile to have a Hellish Figure standard on one of your units. I really liked taking a unit of 10. In my 6th edition army, that's going to be up to 12 or 14 in the old world. And even though they're 28 points a model, that 14 is at like a 350 points block of them. It's just a really solid unit. Gets a bit more combat res and has the sticking power for me to feel that it's worthwhile putting my general in that unit. Now, I would also recommend smaller units of Black Knights in 5s. However, I drop the standard and use them as more of a disposable chaff roll. Like how other people use their fast cav. I know you've got that covered by Direwolves, but a unit of 5 heavy cavalry that you can just throw into enemies and protect your flanks with, throw into a giant, do a few wounds, don't care when you die. There is very much strategic advantage to doing that. It's something that I've done quite a few times with Vampire Counts in 6th, and the profiles here haven't changed. And I've done it once or twice in the old world as well. So it's 2 ways of running them. A big unit, like sort of either 1 rank of, I'd say, 7 to 8, or 2 ranks of 5 or 6. With I think you need the Lord in there if you've got 2 ranks of 5 definitely, to add the extra combat punch. Otherwise, you might as well just have 1 rank of 7 or 8. And that's just to pile on more attacks. Now, up from there, and talking about expensive knight units, you've got Blood Knights. Now, these are 39 points a model, so 11 points more at face value than a fully upgraded Black Knight. They have, however, got weapon skill 5, strength toughness 4, 2 attacks each. So it's like the Chaos Knights level of Vampire Counts Knights. Your Castellan has an additional attack. And they've got lances, heavy armor, and shield standard, so no upgrading needed for them. I definitely take full command on these. You never want these to lose a combat. So having that standard for only 7 points is a bit of a no-brainer. You can replace your heavy armor with full plate for 5 points a model. I definitely do it. I know it's throwing more eggs in a basket, but I'd say you need to preserve these because they're already so expensive. You can't do anything about that. You can have the drilled special rule for 3 points a model. Even if somehow in the FAQ, because this is out before the FAQ, even if in the FAQ you can't charge after drilling, which in my own group we've been playing it that way because that's how we have read it. Now, even if you can't charge after drilling, it means that you can avoid enemy cannon fire by zipping up a table edge and getting 21 inches up and on the other side of a forest, say, or utilize terrain a bit more It's just a very useful special rule to be able to change the width of your unit, or pretty much all the time. I would 100% take it on these Blood Knights. You've got accursed weapons, so your armor piercing, your hand weapons is at -1, pretty similar to Chaos, right? You've got close order, counter charge, which is really good. Dark vitality, so you can always march, meaning that you're not interfering with your Black Knights wanting to take the banner of Hellish Vigor. You've got first charge, very good for ignoring static rank bonus, right? Flammable, because you've got regen 6. Yeah, it is what it is. You might want to take the Drakenhof banner here if you've not got it, if you don't somehow value it more in your Graveguard. I personally would be putting the Drakenhof banner here if I've got a good size unit of Blood Knights, because that will mean your regen goes to a 5-up, and having used a lot of Chaos Knights with a 5-up ward, it is so annoying for your opponent when you've got a 2-up because of full plate, shield and barding, that it's just very, very good. Especially if you can get a wizard nearby to give a 5-up ward to that unit as well, and then you've got a 2-up, 5-up, 5-up on this Blood Knight unit. Martial Pride, there's also something to be said for, in that any of the Blood Knights can issue and accept challenges. So if you need to deal with an enemy character so that they don't rip through the entire unit of Blood Knights, issue and accept with a random Mook or random Mook Blood Knight, and then cut through the rest of that enemy general's unit so that you end up winning on combat res, because the rest of your knights can just slaughter stuff. Now these, I'd say, were the best knights in the game. Yes, they're expensive, so were Chosen Chaos Knights, and I'd say these are better because once you have a wizard from somewhere in your list, you can get that 2-up, 5-up, 5-up rather than just a 2-up, 5-up, and every other stat is just as good as Chosen Chaos Knights. So sadly, and it pains me to say it, Blood Knights, without a Chaos Lord being in there, in the Chosen Knights, Blood Knights are more Chaos Knighty Chaos Knights, which is painful. Next, we're going to Hex Wraiths, and these have a completely different job. 31 points, you get light cavalry. You can have 5 to 10 in the unit, and that tells you that there's something going to go on here. Is when an undead unit has a cap on the amount of models that can be in there, there's something funky. So these are Ethereal, with flaming attacks, fly 8, so they can always be marching. Magical attacks, regen 6 here. Spectral Reapers and Terror. Spectral Reapers means that when you fly about, moving over a unit, you can do a strength 4 hit with no armor save permitted, and it's an auto hit to any one unit that you pass over, and that is incredibly good for taking out enemy units of fast cav, for just doing wounds to anything and not being molested or tied down yourself. It's just incredibly good. Couldn't recommend him enough. And then you add the terror on top of that, and it means that your enemy is taking a leadership test if you ever decide to just throw out a charge with them. And even when you do that, although you're not the strongest ever, you do have great weapons to make you strength 5 at AP -2. And yes, your initiative 2, go up to 5 to 4 on the charge because your great weapon takes you to 1. But you're ethereal, so long as you've not charged a unit with magical weapons, you don't care. It's just an incredibly good unit that I think pretty much every Vampire Counts army could find use for. And no matter your theme, I think you'll find a good way of representing them on the table, even if you don't like having the scythe that they have on the actual official model. So next we'll go on to the Corpse Cart. So for 115 points, what to say about this? The stat line doesn't matter. It's a heavy chariot, so it's going to be breaking ranks of anything but heavy infantry. The Corpse Master's a level 1 wizard and knows spells from the necromancy lore of magic. You also have access to the lore of death. So what you can actually do is get raised dead spells, or you don't really want to be going Dance Macabre or Hellish Figure because they're just too high casting value to pop off. You need something more reliable on them, whereas a raised dead that you can just throw about, even though yes, it's just as high casting value, you don't need to rely on it as often. You can just create a new unit out of somewhere. So it's just very useful to have that raised dead that you can just throw out. Now, the real reason you're taking these is either the Balefire Brazier or the Warp Tainted Tintinabulation. Now, the Balefire Brazier is okay. You get enemy wizards within 15 with one or more models with this special rule increase spells casting values by 1. I think it's a bit too close to be super useful, and especially for 125 points, I could have taken a level 3 Necromancer and have a 24-inch range, dispel range at wizard level 3. Now, the Warp Tainted Tintinabulation for plus 15 points, this is the one. So when a friendly unit within 15 or more of this model recovers a number of lost wounds, roll a d6 on a 4+, or due to the Invocation of Heck, on a 4+, you recover an additional wound. As well, friendly units within 15 reduce the number of wounds lost due to unstable by 1. So it's like having another Battle Standard Bearer, and you can just stack that with the Battle Standard Bearer, and it can say, like, it can save the Blood Knight, anything like that. If you save a Blood Knight and then resurrect one, you've just, with the first part of this rule, you've just got your points back. And I'm using Blood Knights as the example, but even say like Black Knights, reducing losses by 1 is always useful, especially on those high value models. For things like zombies or skeletons, it's nice when it kicks in and just might push you over every now and then. But really, where you're going to get your points value for this is also having it around those high value models where you don't want to lose them, and when you then res them with Invocation of Nehek, you res more of them. So I think it's a really useful model to just have around, at least one in every army, I would say, so that your main units are covered by them. And I do think you want one hanging around your battle line. So the Black Coach, 205 points. You have two things really about the Black Coach. It's a heavy chariot, so it can break ranks. It's got first charge as one of its special rules with impact hit d6 plus 2 impact hit. So it's good for just bulking up a combat. You've got a Wraith with a Spectral Scythe, so that's 2 attacks at strength 3 that ignore armor saves. So is good for just throwing into additional combat res needed situations. It's got terror, so when you do declare that charge, your enemy could just fail and run away. And it's always good to have these multiple stacking ups of terror across the list, so they have to take lots of tests. So by the time you've got some big units of skeletons, big units of Graveguard, high unit strength units of Black Knights, terror causing Black Coach in general, they're going to be taking a lot of leadership tests and therefore failing a fair few of them unless they're like dwarves in the middle of the line. Now, one thing to note here is that you've got the Spectral Coach special rule. So what you can do with that is exchange your impact hits d6 plus 2 for Ethereal and Fly 10. And at least for the first couple of turns, I would say you want to be doing that to get yourself in a good position and mean that you just can't be hurt. Yes, you will need to watch out for getting charged yourself, but it will just reduce the incoming damage from everything but say like dwarf players with magical cannons. So really useful special rule. I do think it's worth 205 points, But as we've gone down the vampire counts list, you might notice I've been positive about pretty much everything except crypt horrors, and bat swarms I said only had a situational use. So use your judgment on that one, I suppose. Yeah, and there's just lots and lots of choice that I think works very well in this vampire counts list. Finally, we get onto the Terrorgeist. Now, on its own, it's obviously worse than with a Strigoi. However, the points that you reap back, it's not my favourite thing in the world. The Wailing Dirge, I like the Banshee more because it's just cheaper. I can have 2 Banshees for the same as a Terrorgeist, and Banshees have Ethereal. I sort of just think it's a bit too big and daft to justify itself, whereas I could get 4 fully upgraded Blood Knights for the same cost that are going to have 8 attacks with the Blood Knights at strength 7 on the charge with the counter charge, rather than 4 attacks. I just see too much value elsewhere in the list than in the Terrorgeist. On the flip side of that, having a monster somewhere that isn't your Lords and Heroes or your characters section that has Terror, Fly 9, large target with a load of stomp attacks, there is something useful to that. I'm not going to say they're absolutely terrible because it's not too expensive at 205 points, especially because it does have Fly, which is a massive boost. Even when the stats are lower and the damage output is worse, having Fly is such a boon for getting it into the right places at the right times. It's just I don't personally feel overwhelmingly good with these singular big models, and I'd prefer invested units. And that's just sort of my take on the Terrorgeist, sadly. Finally, we have the Vargulf. And the Vargulf is actually getting a new lease of life model-wise, with a few different kits coming out that can be, let's say, like the Curse City one, and the new Vargulf Courtier, is it called, from the Age of Sigmar range. Whereas the old model, I think, was a bit too just like big bat-like. Your movement 8 with Swift Stride does mean that it is quite fast. You've got Weapon Skill 5, Strength Toughness 5, 4 wounds, 4 attack at 140 points, which is, it's fairly cheap. You've got Wicked Claws, which is AP -2, which is absolutely solid. Counter Charge, Frenzy, so you've got 5 attacks really, but you're going to be forced to charge. Causing Terror, that's another Terror Bomb that you can have. So you can actually stack up Terror much more times. Obviously 2 Terror Bombs from the Vargulf versus 1 from the Terrorgeist. One of the things that I don't like about these singular creatures for vampire counts is you're going to have to put them in with a larger unit anyway, because otherwise, because you're not just going to like, oh, my big creature goes in and then I run away with Swift Stride and get away and come back like 2 turns later, because you're just going to stay there and take combat res based on the combat difference. If you say run into a unit with Horde, a Banner, and Close Order, that's 5 combat res. So that's actually all of your attacks, including the Frenzy that would need to hit and wound to just equal. Otherwise, you're going to be taking those wounds. I think it's too expensive when compared to something like a Troll to just have on its own and use as a redirector. I'd prefer to use units of dogs for 40 points each instead of the Vargulf. As I said, the models are really nice, and you can just charge down units of, say, like archers, things like that, with a Vargulf and expect to win because of your Weapon Skill 5, Strength Toughness 5, and your Movement 8, Swift Stride is quick enough for you to get there. I just prefer using Fellbats in that role, Spirit Host, or not Spirit Host, Spectral Reapers, Hex Wraiths, Jesus, why can I never remember the names of these things? You Hex Wraiths as a flanking unit that's already flown over some light cav, then get into that role. The small 5 units of Black Knights that I recommended can do that role, amongst other things, as well as the Fellbats, or even a flying Vampire Thrall. That I just like all of these units more than the Vargulf, sadly. And I don't think it's bad by any means. Like, it's another one of them that is just my personal preference that I don't like. I don't think it's particularly terrible. I just don't think it's overwhelmingly good that I've massively found something other than just getting more frequent terror into your list. So that brings us actually to the end of the guide / discussion. As I said, if you disagree with anything or you just think there's something that needs adding, don't forget to drop it below in the comments, because then we can all actually read that and appreciate it. Not just me, and I do read the comments, but we can all appreciate it. And if you're watching this and don't have any comments, there might be some below that people have left that might have different opinions to my own, because there's not anything that's wrong at this point. We're all learning, and it's just more information that you can absorb into your maniacal minds. If you liked this video, don't forget to do the other YouTubey stuff, like and subscribe. That lets me know you like these sort of videos, the long format talking videos, and then I'll make more of them. If you really like it, there is a Patreon link below where you can get yourself audio only formats of the video, as well as early release, so you could have been listening to this a week ago, along with Discord access and dice, Barefoot branded dice. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one in a bit.